Hello and welcome to this video, and I've got Tom Alexander from the jazz fusion world electronic, whatever you want to call it, this style of music that we all love here, from the band Earth Code. We just done a video. He's told us about his new album, and we've been chatting about his meetings with Chick Corea. And right at the end of the video, we start to talk about the great Wayne Shorter, who sadly has passed on at the age of 89 recently. And I thought we've got to carry on talking. We were getting deep into the music we love. So before we start, if you're here and you're watching this, it's because you love this music. So please click on the link below and check Tom's album out. You're going to absolutely love it. We're all, this channel's gathering so many like-minded people together, and I love to have Tom on board. And we all love the same stuff, Tom. So, it's like and you've got to meet some of these guys as well, including my ultimate hero of all time, John McLaughlin, who, is the
Yeah,
reason why I did music in the end. There is nobody above
yeah.
him in terms of influence and
But
inspiration.
I he's a good hero to have. He's unbelievable. He's a great person and obviously an absolutely brilliant musician. And it really, I'll tell you what, he's a real at 80, what is he? 81 now?
It's
Um
81, January the
80
4th.
Yes, yes, that's right. January the 4th.
4th, yeah.
He is a an inspiration. I mean, the guy isn't like, he looks like, an Olympian. He looks amazing physically. You see him, he's riding his bike or he's up in Switzerland somewhere, on this uneven terrain, like, conquering. Yeah, he's unbelievable. It's an inspiration to see a guy like that live his life the way he does, and still put out the most incredible music and hasn't lost a gear anywhere. It's just
I
he's
think
just
his place in music is absolutely unique. I don't think there's anybody else like John McLaughlin.
no,
There's
there
just
isn't.
isn't. He to start off with, he is at the birth of rock music. He's there in London with
Yeah,
Ginger Baker, with Jack Bruce, with Graham Bond, Brian Auger, Georgie Fame, right,
right.
alongside Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, right at the birth of it.
Clapton, right.
Right,
Yeah,
Eric Clapton, they're all his peers
yeah,
back in London. And I know people on that scene, and I know people who were around John at that time. Absolutely incredible. He's there at the birth of fusion with Miles. He's there at the birth of fusion with Tony Williams' Lifetime, and he's the guy that pulls together that rock thing in London with all those guitarists, Jeff Beck and
yeah.
Hendrix, Pete Townsend, and he pulls it against what's happening in America at that time. But
It's amazing he didn't come through the Yardbirds like everybody else. It's
it
like
that apparently that scene was there was so much cross pollination. He, of
yeah,
course, was with Graham Bond. It was
yeah,
was a similar thing, and you had the Blues Breakers, Yardbirds, all that was running together. But with
right.
the Mahavishnu Orchestra, I don't think in musical history has there ever been such an uncompromising originals instrumental band, right, that has been able to achieve such huge success, to play to thousands of people, to get albums in charts,
Yeah,
to basically reach millions with some of the probably the most uncompromising music, the loudest band in the world, the fastest band in the world, pure improvisation. And all the fusion bands aren't quite like the Mahavishnu for me. And I think it's because John was trying, and this is what we were talking about in the other video, all these musicians that came out of the 60s, they were trying to communicate something. And John was really trying to communicate a spiritual thing that reached people through the
right,
music. And I think this
right.
is really important. And so, yeah, to me, that was what hit me when I first heard the Mahavishnu as a very young, when I was 15 years old and I first heard them. That there
Yeah,
was something intense. It was beyond the music for me. It wasn't about technique or whether they could play this or that. There was something in there that other music has. I think Coltrane has it. It's an ecstatic spirituality, but there was also an angst together
Yeah, that's
in
a
it.
great way of putting it. I agree. I think it was Steve Kahn that Walter and I were talking with on an interview one time, and it seems to be, if I recall, it's going back a couple of years, but he mentioned that he was in New York at the time, and Mahavishnu, there was a buzz around that Mahavishnu was going to do this show. It was just sort of like almost like an acid test. It was like a kind of thrown together sort of, hastily. And it was the original lineup, and they were going to play at this small place, I guess, in New York, in the city. And so the buzz was getting out there. The word was getting out. All these musicians were starting to talk about, hey, McLaughlin's doing this thing. And they went to, people, it was packed. And people walked out of there just like speechless, when they heard it for the first time. Because, maybe you'd hear elements of it or suggestions of it with Lifetime when John was in Lifetime. But this was a whole other level. This was an entirely different thing, what was happening here. And Steve Kahn said, I couldn't believe what was going on. It shook us out of our shoes. So I think that sort of explains, or at least
I've read about this gig. I think it's the first gig. I mean, I'm working off my brain and I haven't researched this. I think they were booked with John Lee Hooker, perhaps, or somebody like that. It was in a club in New York, but I know when they started playing, they got to the first track and nobody applauded. I think they all stood there like in shock at this band. It's like what did John Scofield said? He said my punk rock was in 2316 and at 180 BPM. It must have just shook the
it
whole
had
world.
to. And I mean, I know they were pretty famous for being also pretty amplified,
very loud.
Yeah. So just all that coming at you at once and not having a reference point for it. That's the thing like I always talk about. I wonder what it must have been like to drive around in the car in 1965 and suddenly hear Eleanor Rigby come on the radio. I mean, there was no reference point for that. No. It's like you hear that, it's like, what? There was nothing like it. And I would imagine it was a similar thing with Mahavishnu, hearing that for the first time. Don't you wish you could go back and hear something again for the first time? I wish you could like turn the clock back and have that moment of like, oh, wow, what am I experiencing here?
When I was very young, I'd go around to my mate's house. I played drums and he'd play guitar, and we were into rock music, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and things like that. And he had this book that he'd learned guitar from, and in the back it had a list of 10 guitarists. I think it was Eric Clapton, Richie Blackmore, Jeff Beck, the usual guitarists you'd expect. And right at the bottom it said John McLaughlin, the fastest gun in the West. And it said check out Birds of Fire. So I went down to the local music shop. They hadn't got Birds of Fire. So I tried to order it and they said it's deleted. So I just couldn't get hold of it. And it became an obsession. I've got to get this album, Birds of Fire. I've got to get it. One day I come home from school and I don't know how my mom had done this, but on the side, on the mantelpiece as I walked in was a copy of Birds of Fire. And my mom said, I found that album for you. I just don't know how she'd done it. It's really strange. I mean, everything else I had to find, I don't know, even though I think I just become obsessed by it. And I can remember putting on, I put the wrong side on first, and one word started up, and that drum roll, and then they kicked in, and I was literally looking at the speakers in disbelief. It was like I'd been searching. I didn't realize it, but I've been searching for something musically since I was like sort of 11 years old. And I'd found stuff I really liked, but I can remember looking at it going, this is it. This is what I was looking for, Absolutely incredible band. And they are the band that opened the door for everything for me.
Yeah.
I then went and got Bitches Brew, and I didn't understand that, and I really listened to it, and then I started to understand it, and then I went towards Coltrane, and coming back to Wayne Shorter. Again, that's another musician that for me, obviously the first album I got was Heavy Weather, which is actually a very accessible album, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And as I tracked back through Wayne's career, back through early Weather Report to his early solo albums to his work with the classic quintet, that guy travels from almost like free jazz, doesn't he, all the way over to some of the most accessible, biggest selling music in jazz history. Don't you think it's strange the the breadth of these musicians?
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, and I think it just speaks to them as people, and also just the spirit of evolution. You know, it's sort of like it's really, you know, the one thing about these guys, all of them, you know, Wayne, John, McLaughlin, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Joe Zawinul, Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays, all these, and you can keep going and on and
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but what the one thing I think they all have in common is they don't stay in one place very long, you know, and they're always trying to do new things. And Wayne was such a great composer. I mean, for me personally, I love his saxophone playing, and I think he's the greatest soprano. I just loved his soprano playing more than anything on earth. I just loved
Same
his
here.
sound, his approach. But the compositions, right from the 60s, right through, you know, even up until the opera he composed here, right at the end of his life. You know, like on Heavy Weather, you know, Birdland gets the accolades, of course. You know, it became the big kind of the hit and the signature song of the album. But Palladium, the Wayne tune, is just as wonderful. It's amazing. You know, it's a great tune. And the ballads that he composed, you know, with Weather Report, and of course prior to with the second great quintet of Miles, all those songs that he wrote. And I mean, they're just, you know, unexpected places to go. You know, I think that's what I love the most about all these guys is you're kind of going along for the ride on this melodic idea, and then suddenly this completely unexpected twist just happens. It's like, whoa, wow, how did he think of that? Like, why he totally shouldn't have gone there. You know, it's not where my head is.
And the funny thing is, when you mention these people, you know, you mentioned Chick Corea, you mentioned John McLaughlin, you mentioned Wayne Shorter. When you think about them, they all worked together. They all knew each other. These are the greats, and you can find millions of tracks they're all together. But they are completely unlike each other as well.
Yeah,
you know, John McLaughlin's
right, their
like
own
this,
voice.
you know, McLaughlin's super intense, rhythmically very accurate, and driving incredibly fast. And I always describe it as brutal. You know, it's like McLaughlin always says there's always blood on the stage when he's finished.
Yeah, blood, right.
Whereas
right.
Chick Corea, equally virtuoso, but he's like a little imp. It floats, and Wayne Shorter is like an introverted Coltrane. It's like he has that sort of Coltrane approach and intensity.
Yeah.
But he achieves it through space. I can't think of any other player that utilizes space like Wayne Shorter did. You know, and he could burn.
Yeah.
Still, you feel he rides the wave, but he doesn't have to blow it all out because there's an intensity to his playing, which is kind of inward. It's funny. There's so many of these legends, you know. They're all very old now, and every month we seem to be losing one. Last month it was Jeff Beck, and that hit me hard.
Oh,
Jeff
huge.
Beck, just part of my life. Never thought this guy would go. Took him completely. You take them for granted in a way, and it's the same thing with Wayne Shorter.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne lived a pretty good life. 89's a good.
Yeah.
But you know, guys like Chick was another guy that I just thought. I always would say this. I'd be with my band, and Chick would always come up in every rehearsal. You know, we would just talk about the music, and all of them did. But Chick, you know, it's like, and I always said about Chick, I'd say, oh, this guy, you know, he's going to live to be 98. One day he's going to walk off stage. He's going to go back to the green room and sit in the sofa on the sofa, and his head's going to go down. He's going to fall asleep, and that's how he's going to go. It's just going to be, he's just going to go. We didn't expect at age 79, because he was so active right up until the last second. He's doing stuff online and everything. And
yeah, I was following every bit. I thought, my God, Chicks, this is going to be the next thing, because he's so getting, even though he's 79 years old, he's so getting Facebook and Instagram. And
he gets it. He got it. He was so cool.
And it was like, because of all of them, I think just had so much love and humanity in them. And so Chick at that point went, well, I'm just going to open it up. And I can remember watching his educational stuff and being moved by it, absolutely moved. Going back to Wayne Shorter, because we can talk about all these greats, and it's
it's like the wheel. Spin the wheel and pick one, right?
On the last video, I was trying to keep you on Chick, and we ended up on Wayne, and on here we're trying to keep you on Wayne and back on Chick. So but it's a great game to play. 3 Wayne Shorter albums. You can only keep 3. Which ones are you going to grab?
Oh boy. Well, it's funny, because yesterday I was riding around after I heard the news, and I had some errands to run, and I was riding around, and I listened to the entirety of Native Dancer, with Milton Nascimento and 1975, I think. And it's just a fantastic record. Herbie's on there. The compositions are beautiful. And, Wayne wrote a few. I mean, it's sort of a 50-50 split, maybe, or a 60-40 split in terms of compositions, but it's a great record, and it's some of the best playing ever.
Very underrated album, isn't it? I think it's sort of, because
it really is. And I was right in the middle of Weather Report when he recorded it. And it's just obviously his love for Brazilian music came shining through on that one. And I'm drawing a blank on the album title, but Infinite is on the album. Oh my gosh.
This happens on my channel all the time.
It does. I'm forgetting. I'm gonna have to look it up.
When it happens, they love us even more. Don't you?
Right.
You like
help
to
me
see,
out, folks. The album. Why am I blanking out?
You like to see a slightly older musician get lost, don't you? And the only thing you could do is look it up. So what's the track title? Because I don't know.
Infant Eyes is the title of the track, and I know
it's not Speak No Evil, is it?
That's it. Speak No Evil.
Yes, I knew it. You see, I did want to say that and show off my knowledge, and then I thought, if I get it wrong,
do that. Show me up, man. You got no problem. And I'd say Supernova is another one that I just loved. The later stuff's great. Phantom Navigator, I really love that, and Atlantis. I love those 2 records.
They're good albums.
But I would say Supernova,
and
No Evil.
There's a later one of that, I think, High Life, which is a really
High Life,
right. That's a great album.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic record. And
for me,
I'm not. Yeah, what are yours?
Be Black Market, because Black Market's one of my most favorite albums of all time ever. You'll notice.
I thought you were just meaning the solo albums. I didn't realize.
I've got to include. I mean, for me, when I did my sort of very impromptu tribute to him yesterday, because I always like to just react, and I found as I was talking, I thought, my God, this guy traveled. So if you take Weather Report out, you've got the Miles Davis Quintet, you've got his solo stuff he's done, stuff with Art Blakey. The guy's a legend already. Just for the Miles Davis Quintet stuff, you throw Weather Report in, and basically you've got the 2 greatest jazz fusion jazz. I would say the 2 greatest jazz groups of the last 50 years: Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, and the central voice of Weather Report is Wayne Shorter. As much as Joe Zawinul does all his stuff, it's not till you hear that sound, because, like you said, you said he's your favorite soprano sax player, but he doesn't sound like anybody else when he plays soprano. It's like another instrument.
No, it is him and him alone. I mean, it's just Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've never heard anything like it. It's signature sound it's unmistakable. Look, I'll tell you what, Andy. If you had said to me, well, include Miles Davis Quintet, include
Oh, you
Weather
can clear.
Report.
Yeah, I want the lot. Yes, I want the
Well, I
lot.
mean, I would say, I mean, certainly Nefertiti's one of my all-time favorite records
Oh,
ever.
yes, yeah.
And I would also say Mysterious Traveler, Weather Report. And also, I'll tell you what, the one right after it, I love Tailspinning. I love that album.
The underrated album. And I always say, if you want to hear Weather Report burn, it's Tail Spinning. And no one ever talks about Tail Spinning.
No, it
And
is a great record.
and I
Great
think
record.
I'm going to change. I would have gone for Black Market, but I'm going to change it to Tail Spinning because
All right.
in terms of Wayne blowing, it's Tail
Yeah,
Spinning.
he's
And
all over
I'm going
that
to,
one.
yeah. And the other one that I absolutely love in terms of Wayne's sound and the way it was recorded was Domino Theory. D
Oh,
flat
cool.
waltz.
Yeah, I love that album.
And
I think one of the most underrated Weather Report albums is the last one they did with Jocko, and I'm drawing. And here's another again. I'm drawing a blank again.
is it Night
Oh,
Passage?
Night Passage. Night
Must.
Passage. Yeah,
I would say
fantastic record.
I would put that up there with Heavy Weather, because I
Yeah,
always
it's a
felt
great album.
that I was never too sure about Mr. Gone and Weather Report. You know those two Jacko albums, and this is the
Yeah,
classic sort of quartet. I was never too
right.
sure about those. I think they didn't quite know how to respond to making the biggest selling jazz album of all time, you know, with Heavy Weather. But
Yeah,
with
a
Night
little bit of pressure,
Passage,
right?
yeah. Well, Night Passage, absolutely incredible,
Oh yeah,
absolutely
that's
incredible.
a killer album. I mean, every tune on there is just fantastic.
There's a very small group of musicians that I would describe as sound innovators. So I think Louis Armstrong would be a sound innovator on trumpet, and then Dizzy Gillespie, all those guys, you know, Freddie Hubbard, they've all got a bit of Louis in them. But then Miles comes along, and Miles absolutely fundamentally changes the sound of trumpet. It's like a different instrument. Jacko does it on the bass. I think without a doubt, and I think especially on soprano, I would say that he changes the sound of the saxophone there. Would you not? I think his tone and his sound is so important to why this
I
guy's a
I
great.
I agree. I agree completely. I mean, you know, that sound for whatever reason, that sound appealed to me, and it came along. The sound came along at a time when, um, you know, the music was evolving electronically. You know, where there was, you know, it just the way the two of them complemented each other. He and Joe Zawinul.
Oh,
I would add Zawinul to the list in terms of synthesis because for me, you know, he was the one guy that completely humanized, and this has been said before. This is not an original thought, but he really he humanized the synthesizer. He gave it life that, you know, ever up until then, a lot of the stuff, you know, that you'd hear by maybe they were even engineers playing it. But I mean, it was like, you know, you'd hear the synthesizer and it sounded like something from a really bad science fiction movie. You know, it just had those real, it was very electronic and it was it is what it is. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was just, you know, there was nothing, to my feeling, really super musical about it. You know, it sounded computerized. Joe comes along and just he humanizes the whole thing. You know, it's warm, it's rich, it's innovative, it doesn't sound like anything else. His approach, so much so that Korg eventually started making keyboards with him in mind.
I
You
think
know,
the thing with Zawinul is he was an accordion player originally, wasn't he?
yes, he
And
was.
I read when I read his biography, he actually would put stuff inside the accordion to shape the sound. But even if you don't do that, because of all the fiddly knobs and all that, you can change the sound of it. But I think more importantly, the instrument itself breathes, doesn't it? And that's what you feel with Zawinul. You always feel like that he's taking a breath before he plays the phrase. This is both him and Wayne play space better than anybody that's ever been in my book.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
I got to give props to Jan Hammer for basically creating the sound of
Oh,
lead
well, yeah,
jazz fusion.
he's the other one.
Yeah.
He's the other one. I mean, there's a live performance of his song called Sister Andrea, and it's a live performance with Mahavishnu, 72 or 3.
Yeah, 73 off of Between Nothingness and Eternity.
Yeah, but it's actually a video.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It's a video, and it's the video. Every video quality I've ever seen has not been pristine, unfortunately. But there's this thing where he's kind of going between electric piano and synth here and synth over here, and he's getting this groove going that is just like, you got to be kidding me. Nobody was doing this. Like, it was just ripping. And I mean, yeah, he's every bit as valid as anybody out there. George Duke did some great stuff with synths.
That's the other guy that never gets a mention. He's the one that's always pushed to the back. An equal virtuoso. You listen to his jazz playing early on, and he was just, they all are. Zawinul, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, Jan Hammer, George Duke, absolute monster jazz players that then, all in their own way, put that aside. Absolutely put it aside to communicate a message. I used to work, he sadly died, but I used to work with a keyboardist called Dave Woodhouse, and he was a virtuoso keyboardist. And he came across some sound check recordings of Zawinul where he was warming up. And it just sounded like Conlan Nankaro, that sort of like, it was just like the most intense scales. It was brutal, but of course he could have been a virtuoso classical soloist, couldn't he, Zawinul?
Yeah. No, I've heard recordings of him playing just piano, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean,
incredible player.
Just an incredible player. Another guy that I got to know, and
well, you met Zawinul.
Yeah, many times, and interviewed him several times. And
what was he like? Because sometimes he comes across a bit.
Yeah, I loved him because. I loved him because he really was the most honest guy. I'd say, hey, Joe, it's Tom. He goes, hey man, can you give me a few minutes? Cause I'm in the studio. I'll call you back in an hour. I said, yeah, sure. Boom. Set your watch by it. He'd call you back in an hour. And yeah, what do you want to talk about? Yeah, we can record. Now, that said, sometimes if I'd ask a question that he felt was like beneath what I was capable of asking, I'll put it that way, he'd sort of say, come on, man, you want to know that? He'd like, he'd kind of let me know it,
Can you give us an example? Can you give us an example of a sort of question that he would be?
Well, it's funny here. Yeah. Yes. So I had read where Bobby Thomas, who was a percussionist with Weather Report, like late period, somewhere in there, from here in Miami where I am.
Yeah.
And he was with Weather, and they were both big boxing guys. Joe took boxing lessons. Joe is a good boxer, I mean, yeah, and so was Bobby Thomas. Miles was into boxing too. Anyway, I had read, Bobby Thomas read something about how boxing moves and training would inform his playing on percussion. Like it's sort of just bob and weave kind of thing, right? So I brought this up with Joe. And I said, Bobby Thomas said to me, he goes, man, I don't know anything about that. And I said, oh, okay. And then,
shut you down.
Yeah, shut me right down. And I'm like, oh man. But then later he goes, no, wait a minute now. Like 2 questions down the line, he says, yeah, Bobby Thomas and I, and then he kind of circled back to it, I said, well, because I hear in your phrasing, you have the way you come into a line, and I said, it sounds like you're dancing, like floating. It's like Ali out there, you're bobbing and weaving. And he goes, yeah, man, yeah, I can hear that. Yeah, no. And then he sort of then he started talking about it, and he said it's all related. The physical training for boxing and music are related. You know, the way I sort of punch at the notes in certain areas and then step back and fly and bob and weave is a very real thing. And I said, wow, that's really cool. But you know, he wasn't having it from me at the beginning. You know, it's like he's like, who's this guy asking me this about? What does he know about boxing? You know, and
I love it.
But anyway, that's just one example. But he I loved him and I miss him terribly. And I fortunately I'm good friends with his son Tony, his oldest son Tony.
I think it's only right when we're chatting about Wayne Shorter to talk about Zawinul, and what comes across, I have never really thought, is just the difference of their personalities, how well they fit together. Because Weather Report, you know, you can put a live gig of Weather Report on, and when they do that thing where it's just keyboards and sax and they just improvise, you go, that is fundamentally what Weather Report is. It's almost like you could just record that, chart that, give it to other musicians, and that's a Weather Report composition. It was the dialogue between those two, I think.
Well, that became a thing with Wayne and Joe, and I think beginning with Blackthorn Rose on Mysterious Traveler, and then 5 short stories on Tailspin, and then periodically throughout the rest of their time, they would do those duets, and they did the duets, of course, in concert, and you know there'd be these things where it was just, you know, the essence, the heart, the core of Weather.
Yeah,
and
without
and
a
it
doubt.
was the two of them. And of course, if you've ever seen that video, maybe you've seen it of Joe shortly before he passed. I think it's in Hungary, and Wayne comes up and surprises him on stage, and the two of them play a duet of "In a Silent Way."
Oh yes, I've seen that. Yeah,
yeah, it's just it's very moving. It's very emotional because you know Joe is sadly not well, and they're both complimenting each other and hanging on and hugging each other, and it's a beautiful video.
And there's sporadically they did that a lot, and it makes you realize that Weather Report never really went away, did it, for a long time, even though they stopped in '86. That essence was still there, that music was still there, and I felt as great as Zawinul's stuff was afterwards, and in some ways he developed his ideas even further out. I just never felt he was quite the same without Wayne.
Yeah, it happens. There's that something, you get a life partner in life. Sometimes you find the right person, and then you get that one musical partner that you find, and it's or it could be, and that kind of situation just doesn't fall off the back of a truck. It's the kind of thing that, if you're lucky, it happens once, maybe twice in your life. I think of Richard Rodgers, the composer, and of course he had it with Hart, and then later with Hammerstein, and it was that it happened for him twice. He found two people that he was able to collaborate, but a lot of people, it happens maybe if they're lucky, it happens once, and certainly Joe and Wayne.
Well, I've always thought that music's basically made out of love. You love life, you love the world, you love your friends, and that comes out in the music. But also, you have to love the musicians, and you have to want to play with them, and you have to give them love, and they have to give you love back. And the music industry can be quite hard and tough, and nobody really wants to say that, but we all know what that's like, because I think there's a certain point as a musician that you can only improve by having the music pulled out of you by somebody else. And me at my age now, I don't really play anymore unless I'm with another musician. I might do a bit of practice and I can mess around at home, but for me now at this point, I have to be with that player that pulls the music out. And I just feel that these great players, it was the interaction between them and the way that they're set up. I'll tell you what made me think this. There was a Jack DeJohnette told a story about Coltrane. When he was very, very young, he was in a club and he was opening up for Coltrane, and he did his set, and then Elvin Jones never turned up. And so the owner goes, well, there's this kid here, Jack, he's a good drummer. And so Jack DeJohnette finds himself doing the gig with John Coltrane. And the interviewer said what it was like, and he said, well, I started playing, and you give a musician something. He said Coltrane just took it, and I gave him more, and he just took it. And he said it didn't matter how much I gave him, he just kept taking it. The energy, he just pulled it in like a black hole. And it was just because I was, and can you imagine playing with a guy like that would be able to pull that out of you? And I think this is something that never gets mentioned, and we're all impressed with the virtuosity of what these guys can do. But they lived in a rarefied world, didn't they, where they were all working together and able to challenge each other in so many ways, but in a kind way. That's the only that really to me is a secret of music.
It is. And Andy, if I could say one thing, I know we only got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just say, what I miss the most, and what I miss the most about music today, I don't want to be one of those guys that says, there's, everything that is out there today is garbage. I'm not going to comment on the music itself. What I'm going to comment on is the spirit of competition and friendly competition and inspiration. That's really gone by, that's fallen off by, certainly in the industry. The industry doesn't care about that anymore. It used to. And I wish it still did. Even even among the music I may not even particularly listen to or have interest in per se, but that should never have gone away. That should have stayed a constant. Chick would listen to what John McLaughlin's doing. John had listened to what Zawinul's doing and Shorter's doing. They were listening to what Herbie was doing, or Zappa, or whoever, whatever, all these guys. And it's like, okay, well, I got to outdo it. There's the story about the Beatles and the Beach Boys, right? The Beatles, Brian Wilson heard Revolver. Okay, well, I got to outdo Revolver, so I did Pet Sounds. Well, now we got to outdo Pet Sounds, so we're going to do Sgt. Pepper. That kind of friendly thing.
But they do it because they love it.
They love it.
Love
right?
it.
That was it.
That's it. They're not in competition. They're doing it because they love it. And then they want the Beatles to turn around and go, "Oh my God, I love that."
Yeah, exactly. That's what they did.
It's like if anyone who watches part one of this, you being able to take in the legacy and the love of these musicians like Chick Corea and John McLaughlin, and then have a track and then have those guys send it back. You are right. That's what's missing from music. When I put a YouTube video of Snarky Puppy or these bands, I can still hear it. Still musicians trying to do that. And you can sense it. And there's a thing on YouTube where I think they responded to Snarky Puppy, especially that Corey Henry keyboard solo, because it's the other guys just going, whoa, what, it's love. That's what it's a big embrace,
that's what that is. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And I wish, I really hope little by little we can bring that more out up front. And that's why we put our album out. We want to, if somebody comes along and says, hey, this inspired me to do this, it's like mission accomplished. That's awesome. Now you go and you kick my butt and see what's going to happen. Let's go for it. But in a totally spiritual, loving, encouraging way. That's Tom, what it's.
We've got 1 minute left now in this interview. I've really enjoyed this. Everyone watching this, wasn't that a killer interview? Click on the link, go and listen to Tom's album. Send the love back. Keep sending the love. That's what you're going to focus on. If we all do that, it will all be okay. Tom, I'm so happy to have you on the channel. You'll have you on again. I'm going to keep talking because we're going to run out any minute now.
All right. Listen, Andy,
you might have inspired me to go and pay for the full Zoom Pro.
Oh, wow. I'm honored. And thank you for having me on. And thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Thank you. Love you. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Time. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.